I'm Deb, Sharyn.
Hi.
And we've got a lovely little company called Research Incentives, and what we do is help companies access research incentives, which is a bland term which really means get you tax assistance and financial assistance, but lets you cash that money out and give you ongoing capital so you can keep working. How did we get started? Well, we got started because a couple of people, we both worked. I'll go back.
Yeah, let's go back to where we met.
Where we met, Sharyn was working in policy in the Department of Industry, and she was actually the policy manager who drafted the legislation that went through for the research incentives and benefits for companies doing research in the country. We used to have some robust agreements or disagreements, I'm not sure. I think we robustly agreed in the finish.
I think it helped though. Don't you think it helped?
It did,
and, you know,
because I was in Oz Industry and we were responsible for delivering the program, which meant that we sometimes do a little bit of, not say auditing as a word, but basically making sure the money goes to the right people. And so we'd evaluate and make sure there wasn't too much burden on a business. So it sounds strange for a public servant, but...
no, X now.
We're X, thank God. But at the time we were. And the idea was you'd say, well, I wouldn't want to do this, so why would a business? And Sharyn's in policy and say our objectives are this, so we'd have a great deal of discussion. And eventually the legislation got through, and then I worked in Oz Industry, and I had several stints actually managing the program, assessing the applications, approving some of them, going out and talking to the staff, training the staff. And before that, how I came in to be in Oz Industry was I worked and developed our IT system with e-business, and before that I've been an ACT girl, so a long background in IT systems and businesses. And I had a small business with my former partner, and I don't know, maybe that's why we had the robust agreements.
So you obviously have a very long established and quite salubrious career with public service. Why leave?
Well, I think at the time Mr Abbott had thought we should all go forth and find a new career because there were too many public servants, and maybe we thought it was time for a change.
I thought it was a good opportunity, and we worked well together.
Yeah,
and we thought we could bring it to assist small businesses.
Without, I guess, the constraints of the public service, because a lot of companies you would like to have helped, you couldn't help, you couldn't give the advice we can give them now, and tell them actually how to get through those hoops, and what we actually saw as being a benefit to the companies and being benefit. I think some of these programs that are run are supposedly benefit to the nation. So you might be inventing the best yo-yo in the world, and someone might think that's not research, but it brings money and brings work and brings developments of plastics, all sorts of interesting things. So I guess the debate of what's valuable, whether it's a cure for cancer, and while we're working there we got to see some incredible stuff, and some people you couldn't actually help because you were prevented legislatively, and now we can. And after we left, even then we weren't thinking of going into business straight away, but we were approached by a few people, and we started to help people and thought, oh, we could actually do this.
So, what's it been like starting out in business?
A bit daunting, because you have that mentality where I can just go help them and don't actually have to charge anyone for your help. I just know this stuff, it's easy just to do it. And so Sharyn has a financial background.
So how did you find that transition from doing things because you were paid to do it anyway to actually having to charge somebody for the service? How did you find that transition?
Ongoing, I would say.
I find it difficult because you just want to help the people. You don't. And at the same time, you do have to make a living. And it's making that distinction, how you can give that value for money without overcharging people. Because what we do, we've found, and I found when I was in the government, some people charge an incredible amount, huge percentages of the company, which I don't think is reasonable. And maybe it is for them because they have big overheads, but we don't. So we can do it at a reasonable price.
So Sharyn, you're the financial brain behind it.
Yes.
So how did you go about changing your mindset from being an employee to being someone who's actually, okay, this is the invoice you have to pay me? How did you go through that?
I didn't find it that hard. Maybe it was because my background was a little bit different. I actually grew up on a farm. We were very much about the service you were providing, so what you were producing, looking for what the cost is, what the revenue is, and keeping that in mind. And although I haven't worked there for a very long time, I think that never went away. So this is an opportunity that's allowed me to bring all my financial things back to the forefront. And I keep saying to Deb, look, you've just got to remember, we can help people, but at the end of the day, we need help as well, and we need just to make a bit of money as we go along. So, as I said before, it's a bit more of an ongoing reminder for both of us, because we do like helping people, and that's basically where we're coming from. But it's just about that, having to remember that at the end of it, I need to get something out of this too. People are accessing my expertise, our expertise, and where we can provide some of that, we do. But when it goes past a certain level, we kind of remember, I have to keep reminding me, and especially Deb, we do need to charge for this knowledge and expertise.
Do you find, and a lot of small businesses will face this particular issue, especially those in the event industry, that people actually value services that they pay for, whereas if you give it away, they don't?
I think
Have
that's
you
a
found
really
that?
key point, that for some reason, something that's free is valueless to some people. But when you start paying for it, they go, there's a mindset that changes when you purchase something. Even when you yourselves go out and buy it from a shop, if you're handed a sample, you might just throw it away. But when you've actually got to pay your own hard-earned money for it, you go, right, well, this means something. I've got to use this. How does it actually fit into my business?
And pricing is obviously a key issue facing any small business. How did you go about working out your pricing policy and what you actually charge for the services that you provide?
I think we looked at our time and we looked at what was reasonable, and I already had a fair understanding of what others charged, and not in nitty-gritty, but I guess during my time working in the government, I'd seen a lot of small business unable to afford to get assistance because it was out of their reach, and it shouldn't have been. And there is government help, but that has a limit. And some of the stuff you need to know has to be provided to you on your individual needs. And I think we still do that. We look at it case by case, and we've gone to some of the university days and the innovation things and just offered a bit of advice and that sort of thing. We haven't charged for, because I think that's part of the ecosystem. You help them. One day they're rich and famous, who knows?
So given that, what's your plan for growing the business?
Well, in my head, I kind of have a 2-year time frame of building the business up, and then reevaluating after 2 years or so about how we're going. But of course, we meet weekly, basically, and talk about what we're doing and where we're going and who we're talking to. And we just do it basically on a weekly basis of where we are, what we're doing, where we want to be, who we need to talk to, those sort of things. And that's been working well for us, and it's coming up to 12 months, and we'll just need to review at that point about whether we want to continue with that model or what changes we need to do. I suppose one of the things that I'm conscious of is perhaps we need to get on board and have a mentor who's an external person just to talk to us about where we're up to help us with that next stage of growth into the next 12 months.
So is the R&D tax a session where the business will stay, or will it expand to other services, do you think?
Well, I think education's a big opportunity. One hopes it still is, but Sharyn has a huge expertise in working in the vet sector, and I think some of the models that are proposed for universities may end up in that space.
So do you think, how do you manage, because they're quite different areas, so obviously the vocational education and training sector is very different to R&D tax. How do you think as a business you'd make those two sit side by side?
I think they do actually sit. It's quite interesting. When I was working in the R&D tax incentive, what you found was that you had a lot of dealings with the universities, and it always came back to research. A lot of it's done in universities, lots done by private companies, a lot of collaboration. And I looked after the research agencies, which there's 190 of them. Might have changed, might be a couple more, a couple less than the recent days, but there's about 50 of them that are actually private companies, and they range from everything from people who made meningococcal vaccine to testing of animals. That seems out there, but it does need to happen. There's all sorts of things that go hand in hand, and most of these spring from education, from university, researchers go into research. They then work in looking at ways to fund it, and one of the ways is, of course, the R&D tax incentive. One of the few ways, probably the successful way over the last 30 years, I think it's been going.
I'd also say that one of the things is that vocational education and training can be the forgotten sector for where research can occur, where that business-to-business collaboration, those initial sharing of thoughts can occur, and I just think it's one of those things where unless you actually explore it more and are open to it, then you're leaving it aside where it really can make a valuable contribution.
As far as the R&D tax incentive and the businesses providing that kind of advice go, are there many of them in the ACT, and how have you found breaking into this particular space or launching a business in this space?
I think probably because we knew people, and I think a few people came to us. There are others there, and great, the more the merrier. I think we offer a little bit of a different service. A lot of them are financial and accountants background, which, no offence, it's a good thing, I'm sure.
I won't hold it against you.
From my perspective, I'm interested I understand the research side, and I guess that's a bit of difference we bring, and I understand what the government wants to know, and stop that hoop jumping. Sometimes I see accountants say, oh, you need to write this and write pages and pages, and really that isn't what's necessary. It's to be clear and be concise, and helping people come back to what they're doing and helping them refocus on their planning. I think that's the other thing. If you can help them with the plan of their project and talk about it, that goes into their application, but it's useful for helping their research actually work or reevaluate, should you be doing this at all.
I suppose it comes down to, of course, it really is about that communication. Because if you're writing something down and you can't understand it, and you're handing it out to people who know nothing about what you're doing and they can't understand what you're doing, that makes it really hard. So that's something that we can actually help with. It's the translation and helping people translate it into something that other people can understand.
Which is great. So what's been the reaction of your fellow fellow public servants? Have they sort of encouraged you or supported you in this growth?
Yeah, extremely supportive, really, really supportive. I mean, my former policy team, they've all been extremely supportive. They've all been, we're really happy for you, what can we do, how can we help you, if you need something, let us know, that sort of stuff. So that's been really great. So that's on the more how is it working in Parliament sort of side of the world. And Deb's very much on the how does it work in practice side of the world, and they've been fantastic.
So if someone was to come to you and say, should I, because obviously the public service is still unsure of its future, if someone was to come to you and say, look, I'm thinking about leaving, what were the three main things you would get them to think about? Because I'm also an ex-public servant, and I went through this many, many years ago, but the circumstances are a little bit different now. What would you get them to think about? What do you think the three main things that really sort of challenged your thinking before you decided to walk away?
Well, I think you had to work out whether you could financially afford to, whether you could pay your day-to-day bills and whether you could continue on, and what did you want to do with your life? Did you want to lose some of those constraints of the public service? A lot of people that are in there actually want to go out and help people, but of course you're in a hierarchical situation and you're delivering a government policy, whereas now you can go and say, I can help you, let me see how I can help you. But I really think you have to look at how you can manage financially yourself and what works for you, what you can offer. Can you actually offer anything? Is someone else already doing that? Are they doing it well? Or do you think you could maybe do it better? And I think we can. I think I know most of the consultants, and I think we can do it better.
I think the other
Modest.
The other thing I think about, just from a financial point of view, is as an entrepreneur, I want to make sure that I'm protecting my assets. Let's be quite frank here. People who walk out of the public service, sometimes, if they've been there for a long time, walk away with assets. So I want to make sure that I'm protecting my assets. I want to make sure that I have an idea in my head, I have a business plan, and I've discussed it with other people about how do I make it work. And I want to make sure that I can actually find a niche in the ecosystem that I can contribute to.
From looking at the ways that you got ready to go out and launch a business, there's a bit of a myth out there that entrepreneurs are risk takers. Have you got a comment on that?
Oh, I've got a very grounded partner. I think everyone needs a grounded partner. And I have too, don't make that mistake. But we did all those things first. Like, we set the company up, looked at the structure. And that wasn't that hard. A lot of people think it's hard, and it is something you can work through yourself. We got insurance, and I think that's one of the things. If you're getting advice from someone, make sure they're covered by insurance, because it may affect you down the road if they've given you bad advice, or inadvertently given you bad advice. But those sort of things, you do have to take care of that business side of it and sit down and get the structure and the plan, and then work out what you want to do. And I think we've looked at doing different things, you know. We're interested in the regions around Canberra and towards Sydney and Newcastle, and I think they're a lot forgotten because, you know, and I do think you get as good a cappuccino out in the sticks as you do in the city, maybe better. So it's worth the trip. It's worth going and seeing what's going on out in the region.
So do you feel any discomfort about walking away from a comfortable career?
The only bit I miss is I've got to see the coolest research in Australia, and I don't think too many people could say they've been lucky enough to see some of the stuff I've seen. And that I probably miss, because you see that cutting edge stuff. A lot of it you can't talk about, but a lot of it you can. That's fabulous. And I think that's what makes you do it. You know, you think that's what was a good bit of the job. It wasn't sitting there looking through the boring stuff or the plans. All those things have to happen, but it's actually seeing if you can help someone who's doing something cool.
I kind of think the comfort element, if you've been somewhere too long, you do get very, very comfortable. And I would hope that this is my chance to see whether I can live outside a comfort zone that I've become very comfortable in. So this is my risk. This is what I'm looking forward to exploring about me, really.
That's great.
You mentioned earlier about the ecosystem, and there's in other cities the ecosystem might be, you know, younger people, tech entrepreneurs, that type of thing. Do you think Canberra's ecosystem is a bit different, that we possibly have a bunch of older entrepreneurs? We have entrepreneurs who have a day job and do stuff at night. How is Canberra's ecosystem different now that you're actually part of it?
Yeah, I think you're right there. There are a lot of older people, or there's a lot of young guys who are working during the day to fund what they're doing at night, which I think they think is their real...
And girls.
I mean, sort of the plural guys. But I also think there seems to be a lot of IT stuff going on in Canberra, and it'd be nice if it was brought together a little more. I think there's NICTA, there's places which is... I don't know whether they engage on that lower level as much. And I think that foundation, and I know that you engage with them coming out of uni and those innovation ACT, and that's a great start to an ecosystem. But I think there's other places in the country. I mean, that Victoria does it particularly well. New South Wales too. They seem to be able to bring that together a bit more, and perhaps it's because they do have those bigger, more established... We've got a couple of universities here, but in the other cities they've got several research organisations that come together. And I think there's a lot of people doing their own thing, federally, and locally they're talking, but I don't think they're really engaged.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know, I just think they maybe haven't thought about it.
I kind of have a bit different view. I kind of think sometimes you get lost in translation between one level and the next.
Yes.
And I think that that's a bit of a barrier that I've noticed while being out and talking with people and working through and trying to work out who's who and how they all engage with one another. So it's just something I've noticed.
That's interesting.
Do you think we're engaging young people early enough? You mentioned innovation, ACT, but should we be engaging them and starting to teach entrepreneurship while they're already at school?
I think so. I think we're looking at the end of the university even rather than the beginning of it. And if you're going to step back to the beginning, why not go back to the high school?
And with high school, I'd also like to say the curriculum changes and actually making creativity And those sort of things, much more part of a curriculum from my perspective, would be much more important. As well as through, this is something that I don't think has happened, but through the industry skills councils with vocational education and training, surely there are mechanisms that we could explore, use, discuss around how to pick up those courses that they already have and build them into an innovation, a creativity, an entrepreneurship certificate stream, so they can actually support people as they're starting out. So it doesn't have to be university education, but it can be a level of education that supports people and can build into high levels of education.
So just a question, I mean obviously you're two females, female entrepreneurs are certainly on the rise, but we're still in the minority. What do you think are the advantages or disadvantages of being an older female, but B, a female, starting your own business?
Well, a bit more comfortable with yourself being an older female. And I guess my generation of women's quite confident. I think you've had that early, perhaps that feminist rush when you were younger, and perhaps
It's not really a bad word, trust me.
And it's not a bad word. It's not about burning the bra. You certainly need it as you get older, but we all need support. But it's about supporting each other, and I guess our generation of women more were looking towards women for support and men. I don't see a lot of the distinction. You know, I guess in our careers we've certainly seen the less supportive males.
Absolutely.
You've seen the less supportive females. I think you need to take it on a supportive person. And I haven't too much thought, oh, I'm a woman, you know, hear me raw. Most people hear me raw, but you know, nothing to do with the woman.
What about you, Sharyn? Do you think there's any advantage or disadvantage?
I have to say I've never looked at it through that lens myself. It's not how I see myself. Obviously I am female, don't get me wrong, I understand that. But I would hope that in going out and meeting people and talking with people, they go to the experience, the knowledge, the connections, rather than am I female or am I male?
So what advice would you give to our young females that are thinking about going down this path? Because there's still a little bit of reluctance with young females. So what advice would you give them?
Don't be scared.
And find a supportive person to help you, whether it's a male or a female. But I think you need that support when you're a bit younger. But even when you're a bit older, you need those sort of... We've got the networks and you build those. It's a bit different. We're out in the real world, as people say, which is a good thing.
You mentioned mentorship. How do you go, what are you looking for in a mentor? And you know, so very often it's a reciprocal arrangement where the mentor actually gets as much from the relationship as the mentee does. What would you bring to a relationship like that, and what would you be looking for in return?
I think I'm looking for perhaps someone who's had that experience, like you've both had experience where you've been in that public system and you've come into the private enterprise, but you're looking for someone that can stop you making some of the silly mistakes that they've probably made. And perhaps you can share what you want to do and your background knowledge, because you'll bring knowledge, you'll bring something. And it's not just because we're sort of older, there's a lot of young people. We met with a young guy from the university and a girl from the university, and they're so bright and fresh and full of ideas, and you feed off that. And I think you just get that natural exchange. If you find the right mentor, you know when you meet them, can this person help me? Can I help them? You know?
I'm looking for, as you're saying, a bit of a fit.
Yeah.
I'd like to know that the person I'm working with may not have the same skill set or same experience that I have, but have different experience that I might be looking for, or a different skill set that I might be looking for, that I can build and bounce ideas off. Deb will know that I like talking things out and bouncing ideas, and that's where a lot of our discussions
Like, we're
come
very different and get on really well, I think, because we're different. And I think you want that from a mentor. You want something different. You don't want someone who's going to tell you the same thing or say, yes, aren't you clever or something.
Whether it's family business or whether it's partners in business, invariably there's going to be a difference of opinion on certain things. Have you got any tips as to how you handle these robust discussions?
We started out, didn't we? And we had this discussion up front because we were friends before we started this about what was important to us, and whether it was the business or whether it was friendship or what we wanted to make sure that we maintained out of this. And we said it was friendship, and so we had the discussion up front.
And we already had worked together and knew each other's personalities quite well, so that helped. We knew we could work together, even if you come sometimes from very different perspectives or you want things. It's basically respecting the person you're working with, or respecting anybody.
Yes, you
When it
don't have
comes
to
to-
agree all the time.
No,
You just don't. You
Because
just
the business wouldn't grow if you agreed all the time, would it?
No, you just have to be able to work it through and say, we agree to disagree on this point. Is this something we can come back to? Is this something we really need to decide? And that's how we basically deal with it.
So if there was a decision that you were both, polar opposites on, what kind of strategy do you use to solve those sorts of situations?
I don't think we've come quite to that, but maybe we'll toss a coin. It depends on how important it is to you. Is it life and death? Is it really important? And I think people get hung up on things that perhaps aren't life or death. We don't always agree on everything, but we do come to an agreement.
Because quite often, one of the big problems when people are starting up in business is, are all clients good clients? Right? Are they all the clients that you really want to have or you need to have? Because obviously everything's worth money, so if you take everybody on as a client, you're in a slightly different position because you actually know your client base. But how do you make the decision about whether or not a client is one that you want to build a relationship with and keep as a long-term client?
We have that discussion after we meet a client, and we've met a couple that we didn't think we could help. And I don't think we'd be helping them by applying for funding that wouldn't be in their best interest, even though they thought it was. I think sometimes you have to say, well, I don't think I'm doing the right thing. And sometimes you meet someone and you aren't going to get on, so perhaps there's someone else that can help them. And I think that you have to make that call.
I think the older I've got, the more I've learnt to listen to my first instincts about meeting people and what they really tell me and whether I can work with them, whether that makes sense to me, what they're suggesting. And if I have a thought about that or a niggle about that, I certainly always talk to Deb about that and we compare our notes.
Yeah.
That's good.
How have you dealt with, there's, the question that keeps coming up around work-life balance. Anybody starting a business will soon find out that this is pretty much a 24/7 operation. How have you managed to put structure around your workday and have family or private time as well?
Oh God, a woman just does these things. I think I've always done it, I was a single mother with several children, worked a couple of jobs. One job was to pay the childcare, one was so you could go to work. Fun times. Thankfully they're changing, but you do put in that structure and we do have fun together. Like if we have a business meeting, we'll sit down and have lunch and talk about things and then, get the nitty-gritty over and have lunch and have a talk, That balance of you've got to have lunch, so why not have your meeting at the same time, unless you've got one of those structured, So we're a bit looser now, it's great.
And finding that first client is often a real challenge. How did you go about finding your first client?
They found us.
Yeah, I think we were very, very lucky because when I was still working, Deb wasn't working, and because of what I used to do, I was chatting to one of our executive assistants, and her husband's business was looking at the R&D tax incentive and had no idea really what they were doing, and she was looking for someone internal who could give them a hand, and she just came and said, "Sharyn, can you help me?" And I worked in vocational education and training, and I said, "Sure, I can help you. Would you like me to bring a friend who can actually help you out more?" And we just went and met with them and talked them through and walked them through what was expected and just assisted them. So that was really good.
So how are you marketing yourselves?
We haven't particularly. We do need to get out and do that. But I think a lot of it's come to us, and it's been interesting. There's people just know what you're doing. Your competitors know what you're doing, and they might say, "Oh, they're great," or "they're not." And in either case, it tends to send people to your door. So who knows?
Well, certainly out of the clients that we've had, they've always been very positive and said, "Look, if you need someone to, if you've got a client who comes to you and wants a reference, we're happy to give those references," which has been great.
Yeah. So that's really
That word of mouth.
word of mouth. And we are looking at expanding. We really are interested in the regions. And I think when I was working in the government, there are people out working there, but there's so much stuff going on. And, you know, we're very close to Cooma, we're very close to Goulburn, and Newcastle has a fantastic hub of innovation going on up there. So we're interested in exploring that and looking for clients. I think you have to go look for them.
They're not gonna
Get
come to
out
us.
of the office, get out of the cafe and go have a door knock.
It is interesting though, isn't it? That we have a bit more freedom and we can do that, and we really enjoy doing that.
Well, Deb and Sharyn, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and all the best with your business.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity.
That's